The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to our cycling formula presentation of the Leadville 100 pre-race talk. The cycling formula is a subsidiary of QT2 Systems LLC, an endurance coaching brand of companies ranging in triathlon, running, and most in this case cycling. So this is a presentation centered around the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race, which is, on this occasion, the 2019 edition is about 9 days away. So, hold on. So what are we going to do today? My name is Tim Snow. I am with QT2 Systems. I'm the Training Services Director. I'm also a 5-time finisher of the Leadville Trail 100. And hopefully after next weekend, a 6-time finisher. That is my goal. So I have a pretty good deal of experience in this race, having completed it several times. And also a pretty good perspective, I think, having completed it, coming from Boston, or south of Boston where I live at about 110 feet and have raced with relative success at the demands of the 10,000 foot elevation of the Leadville Trail 100. So what are we going to look at today? We're going to talk about what the Leadville Trail 100 is, the course, the key climbs, the descents, the fueling demands and challenges, changes for 2019. We'll speak to the aid stations, cutoff times, of course, the altitude of the race and the pacing implications that exist as a result of the altitude, the weather typical for the event, and just some miscellaneous other recommendations. And I have what I consider to be a pretty good graphic on goal split times and where one needs to be on the course during those times. So let's get started. Again, the cycling formula is one of our subsidiary brands of QT2 Systems, focused on all genres of cycling, most notably road, gravel, cyclocross, and mountain bike. More information on us can be found at www.thecyclingformula.com. Okay, so what is the Leadville 100? The Leadville 100 is an ultra-endurance mountain bike event. It was co-founded by Ken Kluber. Ken Kluber. He is a local to the Leadville area, and during a time of economic downturn, Leadville is a mining town through and through, and at a time when the specific minerals and metals that they were mining in the Leadville area had kind of declined, the town saw a tremendous downturn, and he brought to the idea of getting people to come to the Leadville area because it is a beautiful area, amazing views. And I don't know if it's the highest, but it's pretty close to the highest incorporated town in the U.S. There might be one other town that's slightly higher, but only by a matter of feet. So his goal was to bring people to the area and to show them what Leadville had to offer. And he's done a great job. The event brings probably about 2,500 people, maybe upwards of 3,000 people to the small little rinky-dink mountain town, which is just a cool place to be. Since then, I believe, and if you kind of look around as you're approaching Leadville from, say, the Copper Mountain area, you can see them actually the mining. I believe that they have begun remining for something called molybdenum, and you can see over the course of the years, because having been there several times now, you can see them actually kind of dismantling one of the mountains in the mining efforts that they're making. So I do believe that Leadville's kind of it's making a little bit of a comeback. Partially, I think, because of the efforts of Ken Kluber, but also just the mining has kind of come back a bit. The race was started in 1994. It's 104 miles in length. Elevation gain is somewhere between 11 and 12,000 miles. It is significant. The lowest point on the course, I believe, is around the Twin Lakes area, which is 9,200 feet, and the highest point is at the top of Columbine Mine, just under 12,500 feet. And Ken Kluber, he's now an older gentleman. He cowboy hat, and he is the race starter each year, and he starts the race off with a shotgun, which is a pretty cool way to start an event. So that is the Leadville 100. The course, it's a very cool course. It is an out and back, almost an exact out and back, not quite, but pretty close. And I'm just going to run through this slide real quick. It starts in Leadville at 10,200 feet, and right here, and it goes up to Columbine Mine, which is at around 12,500 feet. And most of the course is on forest trails, some mountain dirt roads, some ATV trails. Total elevation gain again is like somewhere between 11 and 12,000 feet. There is pavement for sure out there with certainty, but that pavement typically just kind of connects the different trails and Jeep roads and ATV trails. So it starts in Leadville. You have a quick little descent down into some ranch type areas, which then kind of leads you into the first climb of the day, a bottlenecked climb called St. Kevin's. And then as you make that climb, it's a slow climb. Primarily, it's a little steep at the beginning, but then it's really not too bad. But really, the biggest issue at St. Kevin's, it's so early in the race, is that there are tremendous bottlenecks in that. So it requires a lot of patience. You climb up St. Kevin's, then you start this drop, a solid descent on pavement around Turquoise Lake. Okay, beautiful lake actually. And then you start climbing up what I call Hope Pass, and that is made up of two different climbs. You have initially the Hagerman climb and then the Sugarloaf climb. The Hagerman climb is a dirt road, really a dirt road, even bigger than a Jeep road, I would say. And then that translates into the Sugarloaf climb, which is much narrower, probably more of an ATV type trail. Narrower, rockier, more technical, but not too technical. Not anything you need to worry about. These two climbs are really nice climbs, to be honest. They top out at the top of Powerline, which we'll come back to later, but you descend down Powerline, which is really probably the more technical descent of the day. It's about 4 miles in length, and it's pretty notorious just in the videos of that you may have seen in the year that Lance Armstrong did the race. The video that was made, Race Across the Sky, the Powerline descent, or a portion of the Powerline descent, is pretty distinctive in that video. And then you enter into some pavement, and you're going into some wide dirt roads, flat. This area is very flat. May not look it on the profile, but it is actually very flat. You drop down into the Twin Lakes area, which is kind of the big aid station, or the big aid zone. That's probably where you want to send friends and family who may be there supporting you. It's really a pretty good party atmosphere. You probably won't want to leave when you get there. And that sets you up for the big climb up to Columbine. This 10-mile climb, 5 miles of it is on a Jeep road. Pretty, definitely climbing, but relatively tamish. Wide switchbacks, and then that dumps out into a pretty narrow, rocky path, loose, I would say, pretty technical. The biggest issue there is that there's two-way traffic, so you really have to be careful. The other big issue is that it's just another bottleneck, because you're going from this climb that's pretty tame into this very technical type and steep climb. So that's really where most riders end up having to walk a pretty significant portion of that because of the bottleneck. And then that feeds out into something that's a little more rideable in the final portion of the Columbine climb, up to the turnaround where there's another aid station. You turn around, and now you're descending. You're still in the two-way traffic, but you're coming down on the two-way traffic. And it's a little technical. You got to watch for the people. You need to watch for the looseness until you get to the Jeep road section, where it's just much better descending. A little rutted at times, not too bad, and switchbacky, so you just have to watch your speed, but nothing too bad. You drop back into a little bit of trail off-road, but flat pipeline, which is that flat dirt road section, off-road riding, I would call it, but not in any way technical. And into the, I'm sorry, I missed the Twin Lakes. You go back to the Twin Lakes aid station at around mile 60. And that's the party atmosphere. You get back to the pipeline section, which leads you to probably the most difficult climb of the day, which is the powerline climb. And then you descend down Hope Pass, so Sugarloaf and Hagerman, and then you climb up that paved road that I talked about earlier down here that goes around Turquoise Lake. It's kind of an annoying climb, but it's on pavement. It's for all intents and purposes, it's not too bad, but it is a little longer than you want it to be. That kicks you out at the top of St. Kevin's, where you descend down and then head back towards town. It's not an exact out and back, and you just kind of end up on this straightaway dirt road that leads you into town. That is the course. I'll come back to the slide in a bit when I talk about a few other things, but it's a lot of climbing, like I said, but none other than the bottlenecks, which will probably force you off the bike at times, both at the beginning with St. Kevin's and then towards the end of Columbine. Most of it is very, very rideable. Oops, sorry. Okay, so the first climb, let's go through the climbs. The first climb is St. Kevin's. It's about a 2.5 mile climb. You started around mile 5 of the ride. Started at mile 6, and it ends around 8.5. It is, if I'm looking at this, a little steep through this portion where my cursor is right now. But the issue with that is heavy bottlenecks. In the years past when I've done it, I have been really just kind of barely riding my bike. I stay on the bike, probably riding at 2 miles an hour. I have my Garmin set to auto pause at about 1.5 miles an hour, and it's doing that constant buzzing thing where it's pausing and going. Very annoying just because of the bottlenecks. Otherwise, it's very climbable. This is the steeper section in here. It grades out at about, say, 9%. Once you make this turn, the bottleneck does clear up pretty well, and you're able to ride. It is less steep on this section of the climb. So towards the end, it definitely gets less steep. But the biggest issue at the St. Kevin's climb initially is the bottleneck that occurs. So it's very, very crowded. I recommend that some people may try to position themselves before then. That can be difficult because it requires you to go up probably harder than you should at that particular elevation. But the best luck I've had in riding that is to just accept the crowding and just wait and let the traffic be. I try my best to stay on the bike as much as I can. And then as soon as you make this turn, it does open up a bit, which is nice. There's a good time to put some calories in the body and hydration. The physical demands won't be great as you're kind of on the steeper section where you're not really going anywhere. So use the time to get some fluids down. Okay, that feeds into the Hagerman and Sugarloaf climbs, which is Hope Pass, I had said before. So Hagerman is about a 3-mile climb. It's a dirt road. It's not technical at all. I shouldn't even say not too technical. It's just not technical at all. Starts at mile 14 up to 17. It is an excellent opportunity to get some food in you. You will have just been coming off a very, very fast descent around Turquoise Lake, and now you start to go up this you're climbing, but it's pretty gradual. It's a really good time to get some calories down and get some hydration in. That goes right into the Sugarloaf climb, which, as I said earlier, narrows, becomes much more technical, but not technical that you need to worry about. It's just rockier and looser, but I wouldn't consider it loose. It's just looser than Hagerman for sure, and much rockier than Hagerman for sure, but also I wouldn't consider it rocky per se. That goes from about miles 17 to 19. It tops out at the top of Powerline, and it definitely gets less steep as you go. So it starts out a little steeper and then tames out as you approach the top. And then we have the Columbine climb. The Columbine climb is a 10-mile climb. It starts at about mile 41. This picture that's on the screen right now is a picture that more towards the top. I would consider the Columbine climb to have 3 tiers to it. And this is what I would consider to be the 3rd tier, which is closer to the turnaround. This is in terms of difficulty, this is the second or the middle portion in terms of difficulty. It's the end of the climb, but the easier portion of the climb is the Jeep Road, the initial 5 miles. And then you go into that rocky, technical, loose bottleneck section that I spoke of earlier. That part really stinks, and you probably end up having to walk your bike. By the time you get to this section, you're going to be really high in terms of altitude, but it definitely becomes much more rideable through here than it was in that middle section, that rocky, loose section. So we have a 10-mile climb, starts at about 41, ends at about 51, 3,500 feet of climbing in those 10 miles. You're going to have the bottleneck on, I'm sorry, oncoming traffic or two-way traffic on as you're coming up, definitely the later 2 sections, the loose section, and then this section is shown in the picture. This section is this final bullet. It's 2 miles with a couple steep sections to the aid station where the turnaround is, but it is less technical terrain wise. And then you can turn around and descend all that. And then also, so this is another picture of the 3rd section of the Columbine climb. Just you're going to be so high. It's people talk about it. It felt like I was breathing through a straw. That kind of idea. Yeah, that's kind of true at those efforts. What you'll see is your heart rate really go through the roof for the given intensity that you're doing. Your heart rate will probably be much higher than you feel like it should be. You just have to be careful of the altitude and the effect it's having on the body. Don't forget to drink and eat as much as you can, because as the race course goes on, that investment in your nutrition is really going to pay off. And I'm just going to go back to a slide in a second. But at these particular altitudes, where it's just probably a better idea to rely, especially at the higher sections, to rely more heavily on the gels than, say, something you need to chew, because quite frankly, you're going to need to be able to take in as much oxygen as you possibly can. You don't need something in your mouth blocking that opportunity or ability. And as you're going uphill in these sections, there's a decent chance, I hate to say it, but there is a decent chance that you'll be forced to be walking because of the bottlenecks, and use those opportunities to eat and drink. Once you start descending, at least for those first 4 miles of the descent, where it's on this section that you see on the screen here, and then that really rough, loose section, narrow section, you're going to have a tough time getting anything down. So while you're going up, and the intensity is relatively low, and the riding intensity, I should say, maybe not the walking intensity, use that time to get some calories in. I recommend bringing some kind of a jacket or a shell to protect against potential weather. The Columbine mine is probably, well, definitely the most exposure that you'll see in the day you are high up. And you're going to be up there for a while. The weather can turn. I think four out of the 5 times I've done this race, the weather has been perfect. And one of the times I did experience a bit of weather at the top. And so just be prepared. You don't need anything heavy duty typically, but you maybe want to have something just in case the rains hit, because if they hit, they can hit pretty significantly, and there's no shelter from that. So there's no tree cover or anything like that. And then kind of as I talked about before, I'm just going to go back this climb. So this is the Jeep Road, I would say, from this section here. And then this is the final 4 miles. A piece of it is that loose, narrow stuff. And then a piece of it's what I was just showing you in the pictures, which I would just consider steep, but not loose. And so what I would recommend is starting starting this climb is very climbable. Okay, if you're a good climber, this is where I would start to go to work. Go with purpose, but be respectful of the fact that it is a 10-mile climb. And when I say 10 miles, I don't mean 10 road miles. I mean 10 mountain bike miles, where the final 4 miles are going to be very, very difficult. So I would consider that climb to have the potential to take a couple of hours. So pace yourself accordingly as you start in on the climb. Okay. Okay, and then the final climb, which let me just go back to my thing, is the power line climb. Okay, and this is probably the most annoying climb in the race. Let me just. It is what I consider to be, being from Boston. We have the Boston Marathon. We have Heartbreak Hill. I'm sure everybody has heard of that. I would consider the power line climb to be the Heartbreak Hill of the Leadville 100. I have an editing error that I now see. This should be LT 100, not LT 10. Leadville Trail 100. This climb is steep and deep, and what I mean by that is it is steep. The pitch is steep, and it is deep into the race. The climb is challenging as it is. It is excessively challenging when it takes place between miles 79 and 83. So that is a 4-mile climb. This portion that you're looking at is the part made famous in the movie Race to the Sky, Race Across the Sky. Sorry, and that is really, really steep. That's the steepest section of this climb. But then there are an additional more than 3.5 miles that take place on this climb, which really grind you down. So just be aware of that. It is probably the piece of the race where you'll, at the times I've done it, all 5 times that I've completed this race, this is where I've had the biggest struggle mentally throughout the day. So be prepared for that. It is certainly something you need to consider. The good thing is that once you cap out on this climb, you really don't have that much left. Once you finish this climb, you probably have about inside of plus or minus 2 hours to go in the day. And so it is symbolic because it's a very difficult climb, but once you reach the top, you're kind of headed home. A huge population of the race will end up having to walk some portion of the climb, if not a good deal of it, especially this section right here. In past years, I've always had to walk portions of this section. It was just too steep. This coming year, there have been some changes made that I'll speak to shortly that maybe change that a bit. We shall see. The style of the climb is definitely the steepest, with certainty. In the last mile, it's the easiest as you kind of reach the top of Sugarloaf. A couple of false summits out there, so really keep track on your Garmin. So mile 83 is where it ends. So if you feel like you're capping out at mile 81, you're not. You're still going to have some climbing to go. Okay, so just be aware of that. Keep an eye on the Garmin because it can do some mind trickery on you. This is where the altitude will maybe hit you. And the only reason I really say that is because of the nature of the climb. The climb is so steep that it may require some anaerobic effort, which at those altitudes really has a pretty heavy toll. So be prepared, and that's kind of how you'll most often feel the altitude the greatest, is when you start to go into those anaerobic zones. And this is the kind of climb where you could be susceptible to having to do that. So just be aware of that. Try to avoid that as much as possible, although it won't be possible to completely avoid. Well, it's unlikely to be possible to completely avoid. Yeah, and manage your effort. Don't be afraid to walk some portions of the climb. If you feel like you're going way over aerobic threshold, it may be actually beneficial. It may not be faster at that moment, but it may be beneficial a couple minutes later to get off the bike and just walk. It may serve the later portion of the climb well to take a little break from the anaerobic nature of some of the steepness of the climb. And again, just make sure you're eating and drinking. You're still probably going to have a couple hours left once you get to the top of this climb. Maybe a little less than a couple hours, but you're not done yet. Even though you're at mile 83 and you have 21 miles to go, you're still not done at the top. So consider that in your nutrition. And also, just some of the climbing is a little bit technical, just because the power line climb is very rutted in the descent. Okay, so the descents. We have 4 major descents. Power line, like I just talked about. So the flip side of that, I was talking about climbing power line, but initially we're going to be descending down power line. And this is definitely, probably in my mind, the most technical descent on the course. It is, well, it's early enough in the race such that the race is pretty compact. People really can try to descend it very quickly. The times when I have seen people crash and maybe get a little bit injured at the Leadville 100 have been on the power line descent. And that has a lot to do with the ruts that are that are on the descent. So just be careful on that. It is very, very rutted. It is definitely some of the more technical terrain on that descent that you're going to see during the day. But that portion that I just showed you, and I'll show you another picture later. This is a rutted version of the power line descent. I believe that this is now almost like a nicely paved road. It's not paved, it's dirt, but it's really been graded very well. So I think I have a picture of that a little bit later on, which is nice. The Columbine descent, again, early on, the first 2 miles aren't too bad. You just have the oncoming traffic. And now we're talking descent again. So from the top of Columbine on the way down, the first 2 miles aren't bad. Then we have a couple of miles that are very loose and narrow, with people trying to come up the hill. And then that feeds into the Jeep Road, which is a nice switchbacking descent. You just be aware of your speed because you're going to be switchbacking, but it's not too bad. Just sometimes there are some ruts. There are sometimes ruts towards the top of the Jeep Road. So it's a nice descent especially once you make to the Jeep Road. I was talking about earlier in terms of key climbs, the power line climb. Once you make the top of the power line climb, and by that I mean after the 4 miles, so mile 83, that leads into the Sugarloaf Hagerman descent. The Sugarloaf portion is rocky, but tends not to be loose. It's a nice descent. It's fun. It's kind of fun mountain biking descending. A little bit technical, but nothing you really have to worry about. It's not the kind of place where you're necessarily going to gain a huge amount of speed. It's the kind of place for sure where you want to have some full suspension, I would recommend. But it's fun descending, whereas then that leads into the Hagerman descent, which is just a wide Jeep road, and it's just a dirt road. Not even a Jeep road. I wouldn't even call it a Jeep road. I'm sorry. It's just a wide dirt road, and very, very easy descending. And then the final descent is the St. Kevin's descent, which is the very initial climb that you had. So that is here, and that's kind of heading towards the end of the race. And that's fun and flowy. You just have to be careful of what I'm calling them pumps, but really water bars. It descends really, really well. You probably won't have very many people around you at that time. Well, not compared to the rest of the day, but there are water bars that you should be aware of. I would recommend in the day before the race, this particular climb/descent, St. Kevin's, just call it, is close enough to town that you can pretty easily ride out to it and just check it out. Be aware of the water bars are the kinds of things that could, if you were unknowing of them and you hit them at a certain speed, they could throw your ass over tea kettle. But otherwise, really not too bad at all. All right, everything in between. We have our climbs, we have descents, we do have other terrain. There's a good deal of pavement on the course, several paved sections. They connect the different sections of the course, and these are really good sections to group up with people. In the past, I've had to kind of work to organize a group, and I think each of the 5 years, the riders that were around me weren't naturally grouping up into any kind of pace line, so kind of had to organize each other or our group and really get rolling on the pavement. And it really goes a long way to just save some energy on the way out towards Twin Lakes. So in the early portion of the pavement, there's not much wind, but on the way back, it is beneficial to have a group with you because it does, as the day heats up a bit, it does get a little bit windier. That there's also a pipeline section, which is actually literally a pipeline. That is off-road riding, really nice riding, just like a dirt Jeep road, not technical at all. This is where you'll have some aid stations. You can still jump in with a group of people. The group probably won't be as large as maybe it was on the road. It'll break up a bit within pipeline, but you still have the opportunity to ride with people through there. There is for sure in one of the fields some really twisty, fun single track. It flows. It's not technical, but it is narrow. It's very, very narrow. And it's the kind of stuff where if you are a faster, more technical, twisty rider, you may end up behind somebody, and there's really nowhere for them to go to get out of your way without kind of hopping off the trail into the brush. And on the flip side, if you're somebody who's maybe a little slower through that stuff, there's a decent chance that you're going to feel some pressure from behind from people who are a bit faster and handle that stuff better. So just be aware of that. That is some good riding. And then we have the end, which is, and the only reason I bring it up is because it's not an exact out and back. The race does right when you feel like you should be taking a left-hand turn towards town, you end up not. And you end up going down towards this dirt road, and you really it can be kind of frustrating when towards mile 100 you just really want to get back to town, and they're sending you what feels like away from town. So I only bring it up. It sends you down this other way into town, which is just a little bit further, not too bad, but I think it kind of makes up for why the race is 104 miles and not 100. I just want just for the mental piece of things. You may want to be taking a left-hand turn that you're not going to be taking. So, but you got to keep the pedal to the metal. It doesn't take you that far out of the way. The weather in Leadville tends to be beautiful, but in the mornings it is cold. And I say this on a day where it's 88 degrees with a good amount of humidity. And when you're standing at the starting line in Leadville, it's probably going to be somewhere around freezing, 33, 32 degrees, maybe 34. Very, very cold. I highly recommend having some throwaway clothes that you can be in before the start of the race. In years past, I and the people I've gone to the race with have gone to Walmart the day before and just purchased very, very cheap clothing, sweatshirt, sweatpants, winter hat, and heavier gloves. And then right before the race, definitely got rid of the sweatshirt, sweatpants, and the hat. Kept the gloves a bit, and got rid of those at the first aid station. It's the kind of race, generally speaking, where you want to definitely dress in layers. But initially, you're going to need some warm weather clothing at the beginning. Throughout the day, the weather's going to end up probably being somewhere in the low 70s. If it's a typical Leadville day, that's going to make you want to dress in the layers, like I said. And when you get to Twin Lakes, which is around mile 40, the first time you get there, that's a really good place to shed some layers. Some of the layers that were keeping you warmer during the day. Now the day is going to be a little bit warmer, so it's probably going to take you somewhere between 3 and 4 hours, or 2.5 to 4 hours to get to the Twin Lakes. So now, if the race is starting at 6:30, we're in the 9 to 11 o'clock range, and so the day has warmed up a bit. It may not be at the warmest part of the day yet, but you can probably shed some of the stuff that you had originally been wearing. And I'll typically wear some kind of a base layer, and a bike kit, arm warmers, probably a vest, maybe a winter cycling hat, though not heavy. Normal mountain biking gloves, and probably early on those throwaway gloves I talked about. Probably knee warmers and like a heavyish sock, like a wool sock. Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be like a full on winter type sock, but a warmish type sock. And I can shed much of that or some of that, not all of it, as the day warms up and I approach the Twin Lakes mile 40. At the top of Columbine, you're just very exposed. So I have, again, like I said, I've done the event 5 times. 4 of those times the weather has been perfect at the top of Columbine, and one of the times it was not very good. So just maybe a little bit of rain gear. You probably won't need much, but once you kind of crack the top of Columbine, you're going to be up there for a bit. And if it's raining, it could probably be a little bit miserable. And what it's doing down below Columbine may not be wholly indicative of what it's doing at the top of Columbine. So just a little something you can throw in your back pocket just in case. You can shed it or get rid of it once you get back to Twin Lakes the second time at mile 60. And then once you're leaving Twin Lakes the second time, so mile 60, you're probably going to be pretty comfortable. The day's probably going to be about as warm as it's going to be. It doesn't. I mean, historically, I say it doesn't get hot in Leadville. You will be warmish because you'll be riding, but you can probably strip down to your lowest level when you're leaving Twin Lakes for the last time at mile 60. Okay, 2019 changes. The first one is, they were going to do a wave start, separating, I think, into 4 to 5 waves, separate, each going off in about 4-minute increments. And I just got a notification the other day that that's not going to be the case this year. They're going to do that, or they're planning to do that in 2020. So this will be the mass start again. You will be organized, or we will be organized by corrals based upon our qualifying times. But once the race starts, it's just a full on mass start. And your corral will be indicated by your plate number. I'm sorry, your plate color, the color of the number on your plate. So no wave start this year. Back as normal to the mass start. So that's not going to be a change, but I just wanted to make note of that. And then the power line climb has been graded. So if this is that same picture, I'll go back to it real quick. This right here and that are exactly the same place. And so that has been nicely done. It's a very different, or looks to be, I haven't been there yet, but it looks to be a very, very, very different experience. That is the final quarter mile or the beginning quarter mile of Powerline, depends which way you're going. And that is that traditionally has been extremely rutted, and I would consider it to be a bit treacherous, especially coming down. Now it looks beautiful. I don't believe that anything has been done about the remainder of Powerline, so the other 3.5 miles of Powerline. But this is going to make a pretty big difference because I bet you a much higher percentage of people will be able to ride this than have typically ridden this in the past. This has been very difficult to ride. It's so steep. It's very rutted. It's so steep. You're going so slow. You end up falling into one of these ruts that are over here, which are much more significant than they appear to be. And then you get trapped in that rut. Now, the way this is constituted should be a much, much different experience. Fueling. So we're looking at a day that is probably going to be somewhere in the ballpark of 8 to 13 hours. Under 12 hours to be in a quote unquote official finisher and earn a buckle. They'll let you go up to 13 hours. Either way, whatever. And even if it's as little as 8 or under 8, it's still a long day. So we need to consider fueling. Breakfast. For sure, you want to make sure that you're having a breakfast that is high in carbohydrates. And when I say carbohydrates, I mean varied carbohydrates. So you don't want to have a carbohydrate that is a singular sugar source. For example, you don't want to have something that has only maltodextrin in it for sugar. Too much of any single sugar source can create a good deal of GI distress, which lands you in the porta potty, which, or more appropriately for Leadville, in the woods. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. So you want to have something that has maltodextrin, sucrose, fructose, just a number of different sources within the fuel itself. You also want to have a breakfast and a good idea on that is something like an applesauce. You also want to have a breakfast that is low in fiber, low in fat, and low in protein. Low in fiber, you want to be careful of too much GI distress. The fat and the protein just slow the absorption of the carbohydrates for the day. And I say low. I don't say void of. I say low in fat and low in protein, not void of fat and void of protein. Some fat and protein is fine and necessary, but you just want to. This is not your day to have bacon and sausage and eggs for breakfast. Okay, you can maybe have an egg, or a bagel with some nut butter, but not a heavy dose of nut butter. Okay, so this is the kind of breakfast where we're significantly more focused on the carbohydrate intake than we are on the fat and protein intake. In terms of race nutrition, I would highly recommend focusing primarily on gels and sports drink for most of the course. When you're on some of the less demanding sections, sports bars can do a good job. Again, you just want to take something that you don't really have to chew too much of, just because you don't want to. You want to be able to use everything you can to take in as much oxygen as possible, and chewing just kind of makes that a little more difficult. So gels and sports drinks are probably the best way to go. Bars are still a good way to go. And then if you like other things, because I'm sorry, 8 to 13 hours is a long time to eat gels and sports and power bars. So maybe you want to grab a Snickers, or you have some candy that you just want to not as a primary source of fuel, but as a supplement, just to switch things up for you. That's fine too. Just keep in mind, and use the aid stations, but just keep in mind that at these altitudes, 10,000 to 12,000, 13,000 feet, the air is very thin, very, very thin, and the air is very dry, and that kind of sucks the hydration out of your body. So you may not feel that. So you really need to stay on top of drinking. It is unlike humidity, which really makes you sweat and always reminds you that you need to drink. This dry air, it doesn't do that at all. It's you can kind of forget to drink. You can kind of forget that it's sucking the fluid out of you. So just be on top of that. Also, the higher altitude is just more demanding on the body, and just to exist requires more calories. And so you don't need 50% more calories to exist at 10,000 feet, but you do need a few more calories. You need to be cognizant of the fact that your body is working harder than it normally does. And so while you may not have to, do a full-on revamp of any kind of fueling plan you have to be at 10,000 feet, you do in fact want to at least not skimp anywhere. 10,000 feet is not an area where you want to skimp on fueling, because your body is really going to be working on overdrive. Drink plenty of sports drink. That's kind of where you should go for your fueling. I'm sorry, not for your fueling, for your hydration. Leave the water for the other 364 days of the year. Water is an excellent thing in our lives. It's the giver of life, but it is we are going to be taking part in something that is extraordinary, out of the ordinary, and to do something like that requires extraordinary or out of the ordinary fuels. And so Keep that in mind. And water is not a very good fuel. So we want something like sports drink. It has carbohydrates in it, it has sodium in it, the electrolytes, and that's really where we want to focus our fluid intakes. And with each bottle of sports drink, 24-ounce bottle, we are looking to have about 500 to 600 milligrams of sodium. If you are taking something that has less than that, that is okay, but just be aware that you may want to have a salt supplement, a sodium supplement with that, just to make up for any deficit that may exist. The gold standard really is that 500 to 600 milligrams of sodium per 24-ounce bottle. So you may just want to have a supplement that goes alongside that. Okay. And like I said, your body does burn calories and dehydrates much more quickly at extreme altitude, so no skimping, absolutely no skimping. Okay, the cutoff times, and really the big thing on this slide is I just want to point out the asterisks, and I'll kind of go to that, but you need to go through each of the aid stations, and at these particular aid stations, we have cutoffs. So Twin Lakes outbound at 40 miles, you need to be there by 4 hours. Coming down from Columbine, so when you get back to this same aid station, which is at 60 miles, you need to be there by 7 hours and 45 minutes. And then you need to get to mile 74, which is pipeline return, by 8 hours and 45 minutes. The race is a 12-hour mountain bike race. You have 12 hours to finish it officially. They will give you up to 13, which they are calling an indication of a rider's tenacity, but does not earn you an official placing or a belt buckle, which is fine. But really what I want to point out on this is the time difference from miles 40 to 60. If we go back to our profile, so from here to here, so 40 to 60, we have this big mountain in the way, of course, but that's only 20 miles. And the important thing to consider, I think, in this is we can slip into the trap of thinking of it as only 20 miles, and knowing that we have this massive wall in front of us. It may be a tendency, especially of cyclists, to shed weight. And how are we going to shed weight? Is to get rid of fuels. So we may dump bottles or not bring food with us to climb up this climb, so that we can be lighter on the way up. I would caution against that, because this particular 20 miles is going to take a while. Let me just go back. We have, just in terms of cutoffs, and we're talking some of the slower portion of the field, but that's 3 hours. That's a planned 3 hours and 45 minutes between miles 40 and 60. I think some of the fastest among us will be about 2 hours between miles 40 and 60. And that's the significantly faster people. Probably most people are going to be looking at somewhere between 3 hours from when they get to Twin Lakes the first time to when they get back. So my point in all of that is that although there is an aid station at the top of Columbine, you still definitely want to don't shed your fuels in the interest of weight savings. It's just probably not worth it. Okay, because if I go back, and I'm sorry to hop on this particular slide, but this section of the course, these first 4 miles, are typically speaking significantly faster than the final 40 miles. Okay, once we get to the bottom of Columbine, we still have a lot of work to do. Okay, and that work that we have to do over the course of those final 40 miles is going to require a lot of fueling having taken place in and on Columbine. Okay, so really don't fall for the trap of thinking just 20 miles is 20 miles. It is 20 miles, but it is a very, very long 20 miles time-wise. Okay, so let's get back to the altitude. The altitude, it's a real thing. It's a very real thing. Anyone who's ever been to altitude knows. If you haven't been to altitude, get prepared. It's very different than being at 5,000 feet. Being at 10,000 feet is you will notice it climbing stairs. If you're bringing your luggage up the stairs, you'll really notice it. Sometimes you notice it at night going to bed. It can be a little difficult to breathe. I always say altitude is an attitude. I treat it very similarly to how I treat heat and humidity. Um, in that, what I'm trying to say is that when I am at 10,000 feet, it is very similar to being on a 95-degree day. I just have to be slower. I have to be lesser. I am not as good at 10,000 feet as I am at 100 feet. And if I can accept that and work accordingly within that, then I tend to have a good day. If I try to be my 100 feet above sea level self at 10,000 feet, then I'm going to suffer pretty harshly. And how that relates to heat, if a nice crisp day is say 65 degrees, and you try to go out and perform on a 100-degree day as you would on a 65-degree day, you're going to suffer, and you're just going to probably blow up. It's very similar with altitude. So respect the altitude, hold yourself back. Especially if you have a tendency to have a little bit of angst in the way you ride, or like to push it. Try to be as patient as possible. In my experience, I would say that I've had the best experiences when I am diligent with staying at or below in threshold. I try to avoid going above threshold at all costs. There will be times when you must go above threshold, but you just want to try to avoid it. Once you start to go above threshold, it things get bad pretty quickly. So I highly recommend just really keeping an eye on things. Try to stay at or below threshold as much as humanly possible. And this is not a knock on mountain bikers, but traditional mountain bikers probably have a certain tendency that doesn't jive very well at 10,000 feet, and that's this idea to race. They get on their bike and they want to race, and that doesn't always translate very well to Leadville 100. Because of the nature of just being at 10,000 feet. You really want to get on the bike, and I would recommend just holding back. A very, very good indication of how you're pacing the day, especially early on, probably within the first 20 miles or so, is if you kind of feel like you're going backwards relative to the rest of the field or other riders around you, you're probably pacing it well. It's going to require some investment in your day and holding back and patience to let people go. But if you are willing to do that, it will pay off for you with near certainty. And then I just highly recommend the bottlenecks are going to be inevitable. Just be patient with them. It's very similar to rush hour traffic on the highway. You can just sit in your spot in rush hour traffic and wait for it to pass to get through. Or you can be that person who's weaving from lane to lane to lane, switching back and forth, never getting anywhere, but burning up a lot of gas, getting nowhere. And that's something you can certainly do within the bottlenecks, to try to weave and try to find the perfect spot. At the end of the day, you're probably going to end up right next to the person who is not weaving, and you will have just utilized a ton of energy doing that. So just allow the traffic to be the traffic, and let it pan out. The aid stations. There are, I believe, 7 aid stations. There's the very first aid station, which is at mile 11. That's the top of St. Kevin's, or the completion of St. Kevin's. And then there's the pipeline aid station at mile 26. Twin Lakes, the first time. That's kind of the potty scene. That's where that's the fun place to end up. Columbine Mine, the very top of that. And then you come back to Twin Lakes, back to the potty scene. Some people never leave. And then you hit pipeline again. The pipeline aid station at mile 74, and then this kind of informal type, or what they call it, express aid station at mile 89, which is when you kind of get back towards St. Kevin's. The aid stations are for in with regards to off-road riding. relative to triathlon. I'm sorry. Well, that didn't come out right. Relative to most mountain bike races, the aid stations are very well stocked. You'll have water. I talked about kind of avoiding that as much as possible. Water, Coke, ginger ale, goo, gels, and Roctane, which is sports drink. You'll have some fruit, watermelon, bananas, cookies, potato chips, pretzels, crackers, figs, and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Very, very, very well stocked. Use them. I gave you some fueling guidelines earlier about being careful with fat and fiber and protein. So just be aware of that. Coke is okay, maybe later in the day. The goo is always good. The Roctane's always good. Bananas are good. Cookies can be good. Potato chips for the sodium is good. Pretzels are good. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, yeah, they're fine, but just not too many, just because you don't necessarily need the fat and the protein of the peanut butter. Um, but you'll probably be okay with that. Utilize those aid stations as much as possible. I recommend having plenty of stuff on you. I like to use my own stuff as my primary fueling source and supplement with the aid stations. Other people like to use the aid stations and supplement with their own stuff. To each his own. But just be prepared. I would probably be prepared for both of those options, or to use your own stuff and to use the aid stations. And your crew. So hopefully you are traveling with friends and family or loved ones, or with a group. Your crews are welcome at all of the aid stations with the exception of the top of Columbine, which they couldn't get to anyway unless they had a helicopter or something. You want to definitely inform your crew of what you're going to need. For example, if you are somebody who is going to ride with a camelback and you have two bladders, and one of those, and you plan to get to mile 40 having pretty much emptied the first bladder, and you want a replacement bladder to be full, that you can just feed right into your camelback, you need to tell your crew, okay, when I get back here in a couple of hours, when I go to Columbine and back, it's going to be about 3 hours. I want to have consumed my entire second bladder, and I need this first bladder that I'm dropping off now, which is empty, to be full again because I'm going to feed that back in. That is a good strategy. You just want to let your crew know the kinds of things you're going to need. You're probably going to want to shed some clothing to your crew. You're going to want the crew to maybe have some of the bad weather gear. So if you do have a rain shell that you can just throw into your back pocket of your bike jersey as you climb up to Columbine, and you don't use it, and then you come back and you can just give it back so you don't have to carry it with you anymore. If for some reason you got a mechanical or a flat, you can have some extra, they could have an extra tube or some extra CO2 just to have on you for peace of mind. And this is an important one, I think. The chain. Have your crew have some good bike lube on them. The thing with riding in Colorado is the air is very, very dry. It's very, very dusty, and the chains get very squeaky. So if you could re-lube at maybe mile 40 and maybe mile 60, you may not become best friends with your mechanic because you're picking up a lot of grit, but you will be more likely to be friendly with the people riding around you who do not have to listen to your squeaky chain. And that's that. Don't lollygag at the aid stations. One thing particular about this race is that it is a very tight window, in my opinion. Most of the field will probably finish somewhere in the 10 to 12 hour range, and there's not a lot of room for error. So this is the kind of race where if you end up with a mechanical, you could get in trouble in terms of reaching that 12-hour cutoff. So just be cautious of that. The big thing on this day is to keep moving forward, because you don't want to come to an aid station, say at mile 70, and I'm sorry, not mile 60, and sit down for 15 to 20 minutes. You just don't really have the time for that. And it's a pretty tight finishing window. So keep moving forward as much as humanly possible. Just some miscellaneous recommendations. Download the GPX file to your bike computer. It's just good information to have of what's coming. Like I had said earlier, it's going to be very cold at the beginning of the race, like very, very, very cold. So You're going to want to have those throwaway clothes. Be and be very careful in the first 20 miles or so in terms of just taking it easy. Let the other people go out hard. A really good indicator of how you're pacing your day is if you feel like you're going a bit backwards. That's actually good. You want to really kind of start your race after the Columbine climb. I'm sorry, after the Columbine descent, after you've left Twin Lakes and you're back into the pipeline section of the course. That's really where you want to go. Really be in a position to go, and I'll show that on the profile. But where am I? You really want to be in a position to really push it through here, because as I talked about earlier, this section of the course is pretty difficult, and you have this climb. This is a very grueling climb. This power line climb. So if you can really tighten the screws from here onward, you're going to have a pretty solid day. If you're in no position to tighten the screws at pipeline, then this is going to be a struggle to get through. Let me just go back to my slide. Just make sure you drink, and eat. It's this race, even for the fast people, is pretty much an entire work day. It's an entire shift, and so it's just a long day to be out there. You need to fuel that appropriately. So no skimping anywhere around there. Get to the start as early on the earlier side, 6:30ish start. I like to get there probably around 5:45. That gives me opportunity if something goes wrong to fix it. I probably would get to the Leadville maybe around 5:30. Get my bike out of the car and my stuff on, and if there's something wrong with my bike, I could fix it. And then I could head over to the actual corral probably 15 to 20 minutes before. You don't want to be in the corral for too long because it is so cold out, but you want to give it a little bit of time. And then with about 5 minutes left before the race start, before the shotgun blast, you can throw your throwaway clothes off over the gate. This is we talked about earlier. We have 11 to 12,000 feet of elevation on this course. It's a lot. If you really want to take that into consideration in your gearing choices, if you're a flatlander, just make sure that you really have I would consider a dinner plate on your rear wheel, but also in this era, a lot of us have switched to the one bys on the front derailleurs. And then this is the kind of course where having a two by it can be beneficial because it just gives you extra gearing options. And then not that the one by is a wrong choice, but the two by is a very good choice or a very good option for you. On the flat sections, especially the pavement, really be proactive in organizing a group to ride with. That will really save you a lot, especially on the way back. So on the way back, in between Twin Lakes and Powerline, you're probably going to hit some wind, especially on the pavement. So you really want it's great if you can get a group together. That's where you want to do it. And lastly, one thing that I almost forgot, if you're flying into Colorado from outside of Colorado, especially I've had this experience before. Get there in plenty of time for any bike repairs. I've had some instances where just being at the altitude, the 10,000 feet, had kind of played with my my brake lines, and I needed to get my brake lines bled before the race. Just the pressure was different, and it kind of screwed with my braking. So just be aware of that, and you just want to give yourself a little bit of time, and or just pay a little extra attention to that possibility, because if you need to get your brakes bled because of the altitude, you want to have a little bit of time to do that. This is a nice little chart, just kind of where you need different splits over the course of the different aid stations. So if you're trying to ride 8 hours all the way to 12 hours, how long it should take you to get to the pipeline, that's 26 miles. 40 miles, 50 miles, 60 miles, and then 74 miles. And that will land you at 8 hours. Just a note, just notice that an hour and a half between mile 40 and mile 50, okay? And that's for the 8-hour riders. So once you leave Twin Lakes, it's going to be a long time before you get to the top of Columbine. And that's what I was talking about earlier. So and that's even for the faster riders. And even still, so from mile 74 to mile 104, that's 30 miles. That's going to be, that's 2.5 hours to go those 30 miles. So and it just goes to show, sorry to go back again. I know but this portion of the course is not really an easy portion of the course. Okay, it is grueling. But even still, even for the fastest among us, we're going to be looking at those 20 miles taking over 2 hours of riding. So from 40 to 60, over 2 hours. So even if you're going to finish in a belt buckle earning time of 12 hours or 11:59, you can expect that your 40 to 60 miles is going to take upwards of almost 3.5 hours. Okay, so just be aware of that and plan accordingly, especially around nutrition. The buckles. These are the buckles you earn. This is the buckle you get for going sub 9 hours, and this is the buckle you get for going sub 12. They're cool trophies, and that's what they are. And I just want to take a special opportunity to recognize Raul Lozado. He's really our Leadville specialist. He put together this presentation. I actually did the recording of it just because he's out of the country when this is being done, and he's the one who put together all of the information for this. He's a Leadville finisher, avid cyclist and triathlete. He is one of our coaches in both our triathlon and cycling brands. Ironman, multiple Ironmans, multiple Xterras, adventure racing. He's well versed in all things endurance sports, especially bikes. He's also fully trained in our cycling formula, QT2 philosophies and protocols. If you have any interest in setting up a consultation or receiving any coaching or guidance from Raul, please reach out to Beth at QT2systems.com, and she can help to connect you with him to set that up. Very knowledgeable guy. And lastly, again, cycling formula is our subsidiary brand to QT2 Systems. We focus on all things cycling, mountain biking, gravel, stage racing, cyclocross. We kind of do it all, and we're proud of it. And again, QT2 Systems is an umbrella LLC. QT2 Systems and Outrival Racing handle triathlon coaching in the industry. We have our Run Formula brand, which handles all things running. Core Diet, which is a race fueling and nutrition plans built for endurance athletes for optimal performance for the fuels you're putting in your body. Cycle Life Studio is a CompuTrainer and indoor cycling studio that we have in the Boston area. And then lastly, of course, Cycling Formula, who is responsible for having built up this presentation. So thank you very much for your time. And hopefully if you are doing Leadville this year, hopefully this is helpful. If you would like to do Leadville and was just looking for more information about it, I hope this helped you. And if you ever have any questions of us, please feel free to visit thecyclingformula.com, or like I had said, reach out to Beth at QT2systems.com. With that, have a nice evening.